to reread this part of Plato, which the sound was very low first time, so I'll do another attempt here. Let me begin by observing first of all that 9,000 was the sum of years which had elapsed since the war, which was said to have taken place between those who dwelt outside the pillars of Hercules and those who dwelt within them. This war I am going to describe. Of the combatants on the one side, the city of Athens was reported to have been the leader and to have fought out the war. The combatants on the other side were commanded by the kings of Atlantis, which, as was saying, was an island greater in extent than Libya and Asia, and when afterwards sunk by an earthquake, became an impassable barrier of mud to voyagers sailing from hence to any part of the ocean. The progress of the history will unfold the various nations of barbarians and families of Hellenes which then existed, as they successively appear on the scene. But I must describe first of all Atlanteans of that day and their enemies who fought with them, and then the respective powers of government of the two kingdoms. Okay, so here I will stop. I'm not going to read all about Athens. So what we see here, he describes this land as greater than Libya and Asia. And Libya and Asia were about 8 degrees from south to north, and Sweden is 10 degrees. And he also describes it at 10 degrees, I think, at some stage. And then afterwards sank. And here I have this theory that there would have been some kind of climate event or some magnetic type of event that caused Atlantis or Scandinavia, nor in the north up here, to be isolated from the Mediterranean by mud, they say. And I'm just associating this with a mud flood that is being discussed on the internet right now. And that there would have been an event that made it impossible to pass the normal way to travel from Scandinavia down to the Mediterranean, Byzantium and Babylonia, would have been through the rivers of Russia, entering the Caspian Sea maybe, and then the Black Sea. Not exactly sure, but if there had been one of these events causing mud all over, then that would have made this journey impossible for long times. So there was a separation. Okay, now we move on, and I will read. I will skip the section about Athens, and I will move on to Atlantis. Yet, before proceeding further in the narrative, I ought to warn you that you must not be surprised if you should perhaps hear Hellenic names given to foreigners. I will tell you the reason of this. Solon, who was intending to use the tale for his poem, inquired into the meaning of the names and found that the early Egyptians, in writing them down, had translated them into their own language, and he recovered the meaning of the several names when copying them out again, translated them into our language. My great-grandfather Dropides had the original writing, which is still in my possession, and was carefully studied by me when I was a child. Therefore, if you hear names such as are used in this country, you must not be surprised, for I have told you how they came to be introduced. The tale, which was of great length, began as follows. I have before remarked, in speaking of the allotment of the gods, that they distributed the whole earth into portions differing in extent, and made for themselves temples and instituted sacrifices, and Poseidon, receiving for his lot the island of Atlantis, begat children by a mortal woman, and settled them in a part of the island which I will describe, looking towards the sea, but in the centre of the whole island there was a plain, which is said to have been the fairest of all plains, and very fertile. Near the plain again, and also in the centre of the island, at a distance of about 50 stadia, there was a mountain, not very high on any side. Okay, so here he describes how Atlantis is settled by this Poseidon and the mortal woman. And in the Edda they are described as Necken, like Neptune, and Natten, who is his wife, and she was she was from Earth, and she had her people here. Anyway, and I'll read again. In this mountain there dwelt one of the earthborn primeval men of that country, whose name was Evenor, and he had a wife named Leucippe, and they had an only daughter who was called Cleito. So these would be Atle or Atin, possibly, or maybe Atin comes later, I'm not sure, but Leucippe would be night, and she had a husband called Anar, who is also related maybe to Evenor, and Leucippe is something light, and Night had a white horse called Rimfaxe, who had a mane, glittering mane, and Necken, he sent them around to travel around the earth, this Night with her white horse like the moon, and Honor with his shining horse like the sun, and his mane like the rays of the sun. Yeah, I'll read on. The maiden had already reached womanhood when her father and mother died. Poseidon fell in love with her and had intercourse with her, and breaking the ground, enclosed the hill in which she dwelt all round, making alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water, which he turned as with a lathe, each having its circumference equidistant every way from the centre, so that no man could get to the island, for ships and voyages were not as yet. So here I will refer to the saga and how they here Plato is describing that Poseidon turned the land like a lathe, like with a lathe. And in the Edda, it's I think Night, or one big goddess. I will find out her name. Who had a plow and oxen who plowed the land and made these graves that are so significant for this landscape, which is altering water and land, and also sometimes curving. Anyway, so I will read on. There were no ships as yet, he says here. He himself, being a god, found no difficulty in making special arrangements for the center island, bringing up 2 springs of water from beneath the earth, one of warm water and the other of cold. And I can note here that I can see 2 rivers coming into Gamla Uppsala, and making every variety of food to spring up abundantly from the soil. He also begat and brought up 5 pairs of twin male children, and dividing the island of Atlantis into 10 portions. Sweden was also divided, and we still had those names in 1600s when Olof Rudbeck wrote his book, like Tiundaland, Åttundaland, Fjärdundaland, Oppundaland, Tvehundaland, Hundraland. Yeah, all these. I'd say there was 100 settlement in each land, also, as a beside. Something like 10 by 10 kilometers. We're not sure. I'm not sure. Someone is sure, but I will find out. So they divided the land into 10 portions, and he gave to the firstborn of the eldest pair his mother's dwelling and the surrounding allotment. And just the same in the saga, Njordr gave to his son, his eldest son, Atle. Or Atle was like a title, a kingly title. So they're all called Atle or Odin. It's a title. It's not an actual one person. And so this corresponds that he gave his mother's land to his eldest son, and who was going to be the foremost king in the country. Okay, I will read on. So he gave the firstborn of the eldest pair his mother's dwelling on and the surrounding allotment, which was the largest and best, and made him king over the rest. The others he made princes and gave them rule over many men and a large territory, and he named them all. The eldest, who was the first king, he named Atlas, like Atle, and after him, that could also be Thor or Odin, and after him the whole island and the ocean were called Atlantic. To his twin brother, who was born after him, and obtained as his lot the extremity of the island towards the Pillars of Hercules, that is the southern part of Sweden, between Helsingör and Helsingborg. He gave him a region called Gades, that part of the world. He gave the name Gades, which is the Hellenic language is Eumelus. In the language of the country, which is named after him, Gaderius. I don't know if it has to do with Gothic also come from him, because Gothland, the Gothic land is further south and Sevilla land is further north. Anyway, of the second pair of twins he called one Ampheres and the other Evamon. To the elder of the third pair of twins he gave the name Mnesius and Autochton, and the one who followed him. And the fourth pair he called the elder Elasippus and the younger Mnestor, and the fifth pair the elder Azaes and the younger Diaprepes. I think Azes is also one of the names of the sons of Odin, or Atin, Atle. Azes. Okay, and Diaprepes. Okay, all these and their descendants for many generations were the inhabitants and rulers of diverse islands in the open sea, and also, as has been already said, they held sway in our direction over the country, within the pillars as far as Egypt and Tyrrhenia. And here I may do a separate video on all the offspring of these that move towards Europe. Now, Atlas had a numerous and honorable family, and well, here's the picture of Lars Rudbeck, who wrote the book Atland in 1677. I am getting a little confused here now. And that here is a crystal that they found underneath a building that was excavated, not exactly at Gamla Uppsala, but in the vicinity. Okay,